timber tracking, not DNA barcoding. The use of DNA to potentially solve conservation problems. That's going to be part of the talk tonight. I'm going to talk a bit about rainforests. We know rainforests are the lungs of the earth. They clean a lot of water, they pump out clean air that we consume. The economic and environmental services that are offered by a range of forests value about $150 trillion. That's double the GDP per year. Yet those systems are under threat, and they're largely under threat from conversion of forests to agriculture and also urbanized systems. We have to be able to stop illegal logging, because often the conversion of these systems starts with illegally logged systems. Once you go in, put in roads, take out logging, what happens is then those forests are converted into agricultural systems. So this is not a bleeding heart conservation talk. This is a talk about hope. This is a talk about how technology can help save some of our resources. What we are seeing is legislation internationally to help stop illegal logging, and they're looking to technology to help solve that. And one of the key technologies that's being developed in this area is actually DNA timber tracking. Now, the cost of DNA analysis and sequencing has decreased precipitously over the last 5 years. And that's largely because of the technologies that were developed in the race to sequence the human genome. And at the same time, the amount of sequence data that's generated has hugely increased. In my lab here in Adelaide, we've actually perfected a method to extract DNA from wood. Yes, trees have DNA too. And this is King Henry VIII's flagship, the Mary Rose. We actually got DNA out of timbers from the Mary Rose as well. We've actually patented this DNA extraction technique, and DNA can be routinely extracted from wood, from floorboards here, from any kind of furniture. But there is a limit. We can't, for example, extract DNA from paper, but we can from plywood and any kind of veneers. So it is possible to work with a range of DNA products for this type of analysis. That's not a very good slide. As with biology and society, genetics are hierarchically structured. So we have DNA barcoding that can distinguish between species. We have population genetics that can distinguish between individuals of a species from different populations. And we have DNA fingerprinting that can distinguish between individuals. Yes, we can DNA fingerprint trees. There's a large international program now starting with DNA barcoding. That's the ability to distinguish between species. There are some 10 million species on Earth, and we've only named 1 million of them. We need things like genetics to help describe those species. This is some wood that was seized by a German import agency. On the paperwork it said this is all European oak. It's not. It's a mixture between European and Mongolian oak. It is illegal to export Mongolian oak. And these types of genetic techniques can actually be rendered into low-tech methods that can be used in developing countries as well. It's not just the purview of developed countries. These are a couple of genetic maps showing genetic variation within species. This type of genetic variation is laid down by glacial cycles, by geological processes. And we see there oak and Spanish cedar. This is a genetic map for meerbow. Many of you may have decking that's made out of meerbow, and the different colours there are different genotypes. We worked with a company that's importing meerbow. They were unsure of their origin of timber. The paperwork said it came from Papua in eastern Indonesia, but our genetic analysis actually said it came from Java. There is no sustainable harvest of meerbow currently coming from Java. Therefore, this company changed their supply. They changed to a sustainable company that was going to provide them with timber that came from a sustainable and legal source. We're actually working with the Australian government now to downsize this type of analysis. This is a detailed map of logging concessions within Papua. We are working with a range of Indonesian groups to take samples from across these concessions and then be able to identify which concession timber has come from. And we can even move down to a DNA fingerprinting technique. where we track individual logs along the supply chain from a logging concession through to sawmills and even to the point of export. By taking samples along those, you can actually use DNA fingerprinting to see whether the same individual is going along the supply chain and whether your paperwork is correct. This is a crime scene in northwest US. This is a maple tree that's been chopped down. The right type of maple fetches $50,000 a cubic meter for guitar manufacture. Meth addicts go into the forest in the middle of the night with chainsaws and chop down those trees. Our DNA fingerprinting technique has identified seized timber that's been tracked back to source. We have a lot of projects now expanding around the world, working in a range of tropical regions and even places like Far East Russia, where it's potentially quite dangerous to go sampling for tremendous fun. Sustainably logged forest through to, here we have a happy customer in Bunnings. Illegal logs can be introduced at any point within that supply chain. But DNA can also be applied at any point within the supply chain. We use DNA fingerprinting to look from the source to the point of export, and then use techniques like DNA barcoding to identify which species are being imported. We're working with a range of groups internationally. The UN has recently supported this. 3 legislations have been passed in the US, in Europe, and recently in Australia, and there's a range of NGOs getting involved in this. So, using this technology, we can return the power back to the people. You can now make a choice using DNA whether timber comes from a sustainable source or not. Thank you.